So their story is beautiful. We're like, oh my gosh, we're going to do international adoption. This is amazing. Then the domestic adoption. Oh, it was amazing. Went to the hospital. We saw him for the first time. We held him. He's our baby. Like, they were like, huh. And then it got to the foster to adopt. And we're like, where's the sob story? And the guy was like, don't do this. It's terrible.
Let me just say, my name is Renee Leonard Kennedy, and I'm not here with my normal co-host.
And I am a totally normal human being.
His name... Wait, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I was thinking about this today.
Yeah.
If you have a cohort...
Yes.
That makes me a hort. But what is a hort?
That's a great question. We should ask Google.
No, let's
Google probably knows.
You probably... Do you have your phone on you?
No, I don't. I don't have my phone on me.
No, I'm just thinking that there may not be such a thing as a hort.
Yeah. What's a...
Because it's really co-host. Maybe it's something who's misspelled.
That's gonna drive me nuts now.
No, you have to.
Because if there's a cohort, there should be a hort.
And I've never said, "Hey, I'm the hort of Moral Tea," and you're.
I am the hort. I am the cohort.
Yes, well,
I'm more like a henchman.
You are a henchman.
Yes.
But the normal cohort, Annabelle Smith, is taking. We're both doing some different scheduling today. So we have with us the wonderful, wonderful Cody Patrick Morehead.
That's correct. That is my full given name.
Yes.
Cody Patrick Morehead.
I am so glad to hear it. And I will tell you a little bit of thing about Cody. We had this long talk last night, and he's like my brain. Dylan Dry had talked about women's brains being spaghetti. Mine is like now super fine angel hair spaghetti.
Angel hair pasta.
Because it's like so blown up. And then I wake up and I go, listen to that podcast on Pray, and the spaghetti got, I don't know, it got super fine. It got like that glass noodly stuff. And then I went to my Sunday school teacher and then my pastor, and I am really messed up. And thank you so much. But you always bring big.
Well, I'm glad. I don't think that's just women's brains though, because I am severely ADHD, and I think that's pretty much how I feel like you ever seen like the murder shows where somebody's a detective and they're trying to put all these pieces together, and you see the yarn plot. That's my brain. Yeah. It's but 50 times more chaotic.
Okay.
So.
Well, let me ask you. Who's your favorite Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, I really like Benedict Cumberbatch.
I do too.
If we're talking like TV show, I thought that he and I mean I have a soft spot because
Bilbo.
He plays Bilbo. So, right. But no, I thought their chemistry was great. Yeah, I think his quick-wittedness was great. Yeah. I feel like was it David Scott? Is that his name? The guy who plays Moriarty.
Oh yeah,
is fantastic. I think so undersold as an actor. And he's been in a couple different things since then.
Yeah, he has. But do you know who I think the real heroes are?
Oh, the writers.
The writers were amazing because they didn't go first thought. They didn't.
Because that's Stephen Moffat, isn't it?
I forget who it was, but
because he was also the writer and director of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who was not my game.
Well, see, but when you talk about people who have a grasp on suspense and clever writing that's so tied together, I think he's one of the best.
Idea. But Stephen James always talks about like going to the don't take the first thought. You go into the and this guy goes to like number 10. Yeah, the most far-fetched weird thing, and then somehow they pulled it all together. If they were if there were just one writer, or I think sometimes maybe there were batches. I don't know. It was brilliant.
Well, I love it. The way they do that is they reverse engineer the twist. So they start with the twist. Here's the twist. Well, then how do we make it so that it was there the whole time? And I can appreciate that because I think that's how you, believe it or not, that's how you barbecue meat. You start it when you want to eat.
Wait.
You ready? Ready for this?
My mind
Okay, when you barbecue meat,
rice mode. I just went on rice mode.
When you barbecue meat, you start it when you want to eat, and then you work back your time and go, here's when I need to start the barbecue. Right. Here's when I need to start the smoke. Well, and so when you think about the way that they write and the way that they start at the end and work back, so that they know what the ending is, and they're filling in the gaps all along the way. So they don't have to worry about, like we're sitting there in suspense. Like I remember watching The Lady in Pink, the first episode of Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch. And I just remember my mind was blown at the end. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never would have seen that was coming. And spoiler alert, it's the cab driver. Hey, listen, it's not my fault. It's been out for years. If you haven't watched it, I don't feel bad for you. I hope I ruined it for you. You should have been watching Sherlock Holmes.
It was so good.
Yeah, but I love that. I love that style.
But so. I want to ask you a deeper question.
Okay.
All right. What state do you currently live in?
The Grand Mitten.
Okay, the Mitten. That's right, because we learned that.
Michigan.
Yes, Michigan.
Yeah.
The problem I'm having is that this is evening, and I think something important is going on, and I don't have cable TV for you to watch this.
But that's okay, because I feel like I'd be stressing about it. The Lions are on. It's the NFC Championship, as we speak. And they were playing well, so I'm hoping when this podcast comes out, we're gonna know whether or not the Lions made the Super Bowl.
Is that who you're obviously pulling?
I mean, I grew up a diehard Cleveland Browns fan. I was Cleveland everything. It was Cleveland Cavs, Cleveland Indians, who are the Guardians now, and the Cleveland Browns. And I know nothing but misery in sports because all of our sports programs have been so bad for so long. But this year we made the playoffs, but then we lost in the first round. So because I live in Michigan, I'm now an honorary Lions fan.
When was the last time the Lions won the Super Bowl?
They have never even been to the Super Bowl. Neither of the Browns.
Are you serious?
Yeah, there were four teams. The Texans, the Browns, the Lions.
I haven't followed it since I was a youngster, and that was many moons ago.
Yeah, so those three teams have never been to a Super Bowl. And there was one more. I can't remember. There was another team that made the playoffs that the Buccaneers. Oh no, not the Buccaneers. There was another team that made the playoffs this year.
My brother-in-law was a Buccaneer.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. But the Buccaneers won in the first round and then lost in the second round to the Lions, which I was glad the Lions won. But the Buccaneers have the Cleveland Browns' former quarterback Baker Mayfield, which I love. I love Baker Mayfield. So it's bittersweet, but I was happy that the home team won.
Okay, so by the time we wrap up,
we'll know whether or not the Lions have made the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And I'm hoping.
Well,
because Kansas City won. Kansas City won today, which means they're going to the Super Bowl. So Taylor Swift and all the Swifties are going to be really excited about that.
They are going to be.
And, if Detroit wins, that means Eminem is going to be in the Super Bowl and Taylor Swift. And it's going to be a battle of the bands.
You mean for halftime?
Well, it should be. I think wouldn't that be the coolest thing ever?
That would be the best thing. If not, who cares who's doing halftime? Just watch them.
Yeah. And I mean, nobody, I think at this point, there are so many people rooting for the Lions because they have not made it.
Yeah, no, I would like that.
Everybody wants to see the Lions win, so.
Well, no, I think it would be.
And I don't feel bad for Baltimore. They lost. So, as a Browns fan, I'm not a big fan of the Baltimore Ravens.
But the fact is they did get into the game. So that's cool.
Yeah. I'm not speaking for the podcast. I just want everybody to know I'm not speaking for the podcast.
Yeah, moral TV is indifferent to the not indifferent in a cruel way. Yeah. Indifferent in a politically correct way.
Yes. But
I am whoever wins. We're just happy.
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's get down to business here.
Yeah.
I've known Cody. We talked about it for.
It's been almost 8 years now.
8 years.
That's awesome.
And it was my first writing conference I went to and you were there, and you were the worship singer, and I tried. It was Travis Green who was singing that song that I love so much.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but you were singing it there. And it was amazing. I loved your worship, and I loved the stuff that you would teach.
And I don't know if you know this, but I remember that that was the first writers conference I got asked to lead worship for. And I was used to leading worship for churches and doing all this other stuff, but I was really nervous. And you came up to me and you encouraged me and you said, worship was great. I'm so glad you're here. Like, I was blessed by that. And I never forgot it. That honestly, that moment, I even told Kyle this, Kyle Young, who's our friend. Yeah. I even told, who's a good friend of mine. I even said, like, that gave me all the confidence to go and do the other writers conferences, because I felt like, okay, this is good. Like, this is my tribe. These are my people. Like, you know,
yeah, but,
you guys didn't care that I was totally off key. So it was great.
No, you were wonderful. And I mean, it was my first conference, my first writers conference, and I'm feeling all awkward, and all of a sudden you're leading in worship, and it was so authentic to the Lord. I was like, oh, now I can be home.
Yeah.
Now I can be home. And I could rest. I could enjoy that. But I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too.
I do think that I would love for you to tell us about your story. Well, we had talked about that.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear about it. So if you will do
that,
and then we can butt in.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
Yeah. So I mean, you just want me to start at the beginning and
just start at the very beginning?
All
it's
right.
a very good place to start.
Well, so the very beginning, June 9th, 1990, I was born. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds cliche and weird to start with, but it's important because I was born and I was in a hospital and immediately put into foster care. And for the next month and a half, I was in foster care until my mother and father came and picked me up from my foster parents and adopted me. And my mother and father being Thomas and Becky Morehead. And my mom and dad are amazing and incredible. And
I met your dad.
Yeah, my dad came down here. So
I talked to your mom in the phone.
Yeah.
I love your mom.
Yeah. So they're just awesome, incredible people. And I have a younger brother, also adopted, not biologically related, and an older half sister. And one of the things that I love is that my mom and dad opened their heart and their home to me and my brother with no expectation of anything in return. And did it because they genuinely love us and because they have a heart for that. And it deeply influenced who I am as a person today, because I still look up to my mom and dad. I think my mom and dad are two of the most incredible people in the whole world. And but I'm sure most people feel that way about their mom and dad if their mom and dad are really good to them. But I really do feel like, I was blessed in that way. But
well, tell me a little bit. Let's pause a little bit. Because if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your birth mom, because you did have some information about.
Yeah. That. So here's the crazy thing. My birth mom. So this is actually a really, really cool story. So I was fast forward to I was like 19 years old, and I was dealing with some things as an adopted kid. A lot of adopted kids deal with. I was a liar. I mean, I was a conniver. I would just try and get away with everything. I was ornery as all get out, which I blame my adoptive father for that, because he's ornery too. But that was just who I was, and it was really caused me a lot of issues just in general, in my life. And I went to go see a pastoral counselor, and the pastoral counselor was like, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, this, and this indicate that your biological mother probably, given what they know and the data they know, like, your biological mom was probably, sexually assaulted. Like, these are some of these behaviors we know are indicative of, because like, epigenetics is the study of like how the DNA is affected by trauma and so on and so forth. And so they know that there are certain behavioral traits that kind of,
that was blowing. I had no idea that existed. Oh, don't do it again.
Yeah.
I'm down.
So if you want to look, like, epigenetics is this incredible field of research that studies the strands of DNA and how they're affected by trauma. So trauma is actually, whether we like it or not, a hereditary trait, and it can be passed from one to a family member to another. as somebody, I'm a pastor and a follower of Christ.
This
is legit science. And so as a pastor and follower of Christ, the Bible tells us that like the son bears the sins of his father. Right. And we know now, based on what we know of genetic research, that trauma does actually transcend generations, that like that's something that affects or at least gives you. Oh, exactly. And so it's not, it's not a matter of like, oh, this is baggage. But when I think of it, I think like that was a moment I was like, there's no way, because I didn't know anything. And so I went home, after this pastor said like this, your mom might have been sexually assaulted. And I went home. I didn't really know my biological mother's origin story. And I went home and I talked to my mom. So when I refer to mom, I mean the woman who adopted me, and I was like, hey, Mom, I met with this pastor and he said, this is crazy. But he said this. And I just remember my mom got white as a sheet. And she was like, he said, what? And I'm like, he said this. Like, I'm like, that's crazy, isn't it? Like, how could he know? And she's like, well, you're not going to believe this, but the reason that your mother put you up for adoption was because she was raped. And I'm like, I just remember being so numb in that moment because I didn't know how to process what that information even meant for me. Like, I now, instead of being, okay, I was adopted and like this woman couldn't take care of me, like all the stories, all the things that adoptive parents have been kind of trained to tell their kids, like, and especially we were a Christian household. My mom and dad loved the Lord. We were raised to love the Lord. I was a young pastor at this point. Like I'd just taken my first pastorate. So like, I was just like, I was just blown away. I'm like, I didn't even know how to handle that. And, because my mom had always told me like, she just couldn't care for you. And that's what, because you can't tell a kid the truth. I mean, that's just crazy. So
a really rough one.
Yeah. And so, I found out and I just remember it shattered me and it took me months and months and months to kind of process what does that look like. But I remember at the end of it, I just remember my good friend sitting down with me and just saying, why does it matter? Like, and I just remember being so mad that him like, what do you mean? Why does it matter? It didn't happen to you. And like, but he was right. He was totally right. Like, it doesn't matter how that all came to be. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you're here now. You have a mom and dad who love you, who cared for you, who protected you, who raised you right to love the Lord, to care for people, to honor other people. And you have an incredible group of friends who love you. You've got a good brother that you wouldn't have had before. And it's just like, what does it really matter? I remember just going like, you know what? You're totally right. And he's like, you have the opportunity. I remember him saying this. You have the opportunity to either let this define you or to define how you're going to respond. And I love that because things happen to us all the time, right? And how we respond is much more important than the current situation. And so I decided at that moment that I wanted to, and I had already decided that I wanted to be a pastor, but I decided that I really was going to focus on, the fatherless and the motherless and the kids who didn't have or who, were taken from their mom and dad for whatever reason and given to another family or willfully adopted or, foster kids or kids that were impoverished it just became I was like 20 when I really made the decision, like, this is what I'm going to do with my ministry and my time.
Yeah. To and ask you a question. Because you talked about being ornery and willful and lying.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, you make this leap and you're a pastoral girl. So what happened in the meantime, dude? Because what I do want to point out, I mean, the book called The Connected Child, excellent book on adoption.
Yep.
But it talks about the detachment disorders
absolutely.
And all that. Yeah. And it's really true. And sometimes it doesn't, what it's been told to me, sometimes it just doesn't catch up to you until you're in your later teens, your early 20s.
Yeah, I was so ornery and I was so there's this thing that happens in the mind of an adopted kid and you can't, I mean, it's not just one of those like you're rebellious and you're like, I say that it's a little reductive. What happens in the mind of an adopted kid is they're constantly testing the people who are in their life who love them, because whether they like it or not, somewhere deep inside them, they believe that they'll do enough that people will just leave, and it'll verify what they believe to be true, which is that people only love them to a certain extent, and that if things get too tough, they're gone. And that's just, I mean, that is any kid who has been in foster care, adopted, taken from their families, that eventually something's going to uproot everything. And it doesn't matter if kids are born and the next day parents adopt them. It doesn't matter if they've been in the foster care system for 3 years and finally get adopted, or for 17. Like, there's something about a child who is not with the woman who bore them and is somewhere else that they have to reconcile. That is this deep, deep connection. And I think, I mean, it's hard, you know, it's easy for me to say as pastor, but I think there's some of it that's spiritual. You know, I think that there's some of it that is, you know, it is the way that our brains develop and what we know about ourselves. And my mom and dad did an amazing job of making sure that I knew I was loved, that I was chosen, that I had incredible value. But it's almost like when you become a teenager and your parents have told you stuff for your whole life, and then you find an adult that's a good influence and they tell you all the same things, and you go like, nobody's ever told me this before. You know, like there's something to self-discovery, you know, where you go from like this place of I know this to, no, I really know this. And I think for me, there was the point there, there was a couple bumpy points where I just was so blessed and fortunate to have people who were honest and didn't just tell me what I wanted to hear, but they shared some really hard things with me. Like, I remember a buddy of mine that played football with me in high school pull me aside at a church function and go like, I just want you to know, other people, like, I love you, but I don't really like you. Like, and you're kind of a jerk. And like, you play this whole game, like this whole, like, cause adopted kids are chameleons. Like they really are. They're chameleons. They're going to do whatever they can to fit in a situation because they don't want to be rejected. The fear of rejection drives everything. It's like their survival instinct. And so they'll chameleon themselves. They'll become certain people. And like, I had just been, I believe, very fortunate to be trying to chameleon in the church. And I was so fortunate that was my landing space, because it could have been anything. It could have been drug dealing. It could have been gangs. It could have been like, and I was just really fortunate that the church was my landing spot. And I was really fortunate that incredibly godly people were like, hey, listen, we don't believe the charade. We know there's a broken kid inside of you. We know that you're better than this, and we want you to be authentic. Because I think that was the biggest thing. I don't think it was that I was overly, I don't think it was because I was a terrible, horrible person. I mean, I was a kid who had good grades. I was good in sports. Like I did well. You know, I think it was really that people who are authentic can often sniff out people who are inauthentic. And I think when there's genuine people and they go like, this isn't who you really are. Like, you're just putting on an act.
Well, and they stick around long enough to say, I love you, enough to say, I really want to see.
Yeah. Or I want better out of you. Yeah. It's that simple. I mean, like, you can do better. Like, there's a lovingness to that phrase and statement that just doesn't exist in a lot of people's, like, a lot of people don't have those people in their corner. So yeah. So, I mean, through that whole process, you know, becoming a pastor, having some really good accountability from people. Okay. Yeah.
So that was served as a wake-up call to you.
Yeah, big time.
Did you then say, okay, be authentic to people, but I really need to get real with you, Jesus?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I had grown up in church. I'd gone to church camp, which means that I had said the prayer. about 147 times.
And you wonder every time.
Yeah. And if you don't know the prayer, like, you know the prayer, like if you grew up in church, but it's the salvation prayer, like, Jesus, I want to welcome Jesus in my heart, and I confess that I'm a sinner, and it's like, those are just words until they're not. And that moment, I had so much self-reflection about, okay, this is who I need to be. And I had made a decision that was really kind of in my late teens, as I was coming out of high school, that, okay, this is real. But as well as I do, just because you make the decision that's real doesn't mean you don't have still sorting to do, right? And like, that's why we're all works in progress. I was a work in progress, and that moment, when I was 19, when I was 20, when I sat down with a counselor and said, like, okay, I don't want these things to keep messing with me. Like, I want to fix this, and I need help to do it. Which, by the way, there's no shame in doing. No. I think everybody should do that.
Oh, I'm going to a counselor as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredible.
I've been doing it all my life.
And I used to, I know there's probably people out there who listen, oh, yeah, I don't need that, or it's too expensive. Like, it's never too expensive. Like, the relationships that you're going to ruin are so much more costly than the couple sessions that you need.
There you go.
Right? Like, I mean, that's the truth. And like, I just remember that being a cornerstone to, like, I think there was some clarity, almost like a lighthouse in the fog of, like, this is where the direction I need to head, and that's where I need to stay away from. And I do love that lighthouse analogy, because it's like, when you start to get it, everything starts to become more clear. And you go, okay, that's not the life I want to have. This is the life I want to have. And, I think that's tough. I think, and I want to be careful to say this and how I say it, but I think there's a lot in our current society of people who want an excuse for why they're trying to crash the ship on the rocks, instead of acknowledging that the lighthouse is there to help divert it. And I'll say this, that this incredible.
So you're saying they just want to wreck it.
I think they like
the drama.
They like the drama, and I love this. And I have to give credit where credit is due. A 22-year-old told me this, and I was like, that is so wise. And I'm like, did you hear that from somebody? He's like, no. And I'm like, that's a godsend. But he said, sometimes people are walking through valleys in their life that they dug with their own shovel. And I love that. I really like that. And I think there's such a good I was there. Like, I don't know that there's anybody in the world who, if they took an honest look at their life, wouldn't agree that there was a point in their life where they were there, where their own mistakes and their own decisions were what was costing them.
But you're saying nowadays, and I can see that, is that people almost relish being there.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden they can.
Oh, I'm in the valley. And it's like, and the problem is, I don't think that we have people who are courageous enough to say, yeah, you dug that hole. Right. And that's that. I was so fortunate. I had those people. Who go like, dude, you're a knucklehead. Like, knock it off. And that hurts, but it's not loving. Mm-hmm. It's not unloving to tell somebody has toxic, selfish, detrimental behaviors, like, knock it off. You can do better. Mm-hmm. And so I was just really fortunate. I feel like I was really fortunate to have that experience.
You were raised by a lot of good men.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate that I've had some incredibly godly, some incredibly wise, and incredibly sound men that have shaped kind of who I wanted to be as a husband and as a father. And I've been really fortunate with that. So
we left off after we went aside, because I need to hear that part. You were in your 20s. Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Well, I was in my 20s, and I was a young pastor. And there was a job opening at this place called Safe House. And Safe House was a residential facility in an inner city section of a very large city in the state of Ohio. And for legal purposes and reasons, I won't go into much else, because that was a step-down facility from JJC and ODS, which are the detention system for juveniles and the juvenile justice courts. And so I started off there as what they call a risk manager. That's their nice way of saying punching bag for teens. And so I worked with some
came in.
yeah. So I worked with some really battle hardened teens, and it is sad, and it was sad because it opened my eyes to the flaws in the system and the way that the system turns out kids, and really the fatherlessness of children, and what that really does to kids. And not to mention, I worked with young students who were JSO, which is juvenile sex offenders, that would age out and become adult sex offenders on the registry. I also worked with kids who were in a JSO program because of one reason or another that had the potential to have it expunged from their record. I worked with violent teenagers. I worked with kids who were in the Crips and Bloods factions of gangs. We were incredibly violent. One of the kids at our facility, who is since passed due to gang violence, he was shot and killed, but which walked with a terrible limp in both legs, and it was because when he was 12 years old. He got called a snitch by one of the older members of the gang, and they tied him to a chair and shot out both his kneecaps at point blank. So that was the kind of kids that I was working with, and my heart was, no matter what, I don't want to be jaded by this experience. I want to express the love of Jesus to these kids over and over and over again. And if I'm the only Jesus they get in their life, like if I'm the only representation of Jesus, I want it to be good. I don't want it to be perfect because I'm not perfect, but I want it to be good. I want it to be authentic, and I want them to know that I'm the real deal, so that something connects with them. Because once again, war-torn kids can sniff out inauthenticity. They just can. It's just what they do. So they're always expecting somebody to come at them, with an angle, or because they want something, or because they, So
all this people, all this young friend telling you that actually came into play.
It was so helpful, because it gave me the perspective that, okay, I was a couple choices away from these kids. I really was, and that's not an over exaggeration. Like, when we think about it, I think I even said this to you earlier. Like, it is the decision before the decision.
Yes.
And what I think happens in the lives of fatherless, motherless, parentless children, and kids who have absentee parents or don't have that structure. I think what happens is nobody's there to protect them from the choice before the choice. And so it doesn't feel wrong because it's not yet the big wrong, but it was the choice that toppled the dominoes. And
our society is filled with kids like this.
Yes, it is. And that's why it's, when I talk about it, it's like, that's when my heart was so convicted that I didn't want to be victim to my own trauma and live in this place where I was like, oh, woe is me. And I'm this child of rape, and I was adopted and nobody wanted me and nobody loved me. It's like, no, you had a mom and dad who chose you. They love you. You have a Savior who chose you. You have a God who created you. And this story is not a story of grief. This is a story of celebration, that you avoided this, and this. And your life is the testament to all the goodness of God. And I always say, I say this, and I know it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I don't understand why every adopted kid doesn't love Jesus. I just don't get it. How do you not resonate with that story? Oh, you mean this dude chose you? The rest of the world cast you out. This dude chose you. God is your father. He's perfect. He loves you. He created you this way. How is that not the thing that every adopted kid goes oh, that's what I want? Yeah. And I think it's because, I think it's such a beautiful allegory to the way that God adopts us into his family, that we are his children.
Yes.
And
specifically use the word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've been adopted. And
even in the Greek.
Yep. Because they would have understood that. Yeah. I mean, the idea of kids that didn't have somebody to raise them was really kind of foreign in the ancient world. You just took care of kids. That was what you did. They were a burden, and you didn't always do the best job, but you just took care of them. And so like the idea that kids would just be abandoned, like, it's like, no, you've been adopted. That was a legit thing. Like, you would be adopted, and this is how it's going to happen. And so, but yeah, so I mean, I feel like that was the point where I started to really see, like, this is what God prepared me for. And I will say to anybody, if anybody's listening to this and thinks, oh, that's my calling, be really careful, because I went into it not knowing anything, and I'm glad I did it. But it was terrible. It was so tough, and it was heartbreaking over and over and over again, because these kids that so desperately, they didn't know why they were mad. They were just mad because they weren't loved, and they didn't know why they weren't loved. And that's so hard.
Receive the love
yeah, and they don't even know how to receive love, because it's like everything that they think that things are love. They think that it's because we learn what love is based on how we're loved, or how we perceived as loved. So I had kids who were, it was the physical, like, physical touch is love. You have kids who are, gifts are love. All these corrupt forms of the 5 love languages that they were trying to get and go after. The clinginess or obsessiveness is this bankruptcy of quality time, like stealing or taking things is this bankruptcy of gifts. Even sexual assault for kids and juveniles, it's this bankruptcy of what touch is really supposed to be, embrace, and words of affirmation, like, how to smooth talk somebody. There are all these, like, it's just shy of the redeemed version of what that's really intended to be. Really, it's
the enemy's perverse.
Exactly. And what I really believe, God has designed us for, and it's like, it's just because they have been loved in a corrupted way, they don't understand pure love. And so you have to teach it to them over and over and over again. And it's almost more important than them learning anything else, because it's the cornerstone of how they function in every other aspect. And so, for me, it's like when we talk about things, when we talk about this idea of like love and unconditional love and loving kids in a space where they're, they've been abandoned or rejected or adopted or fostered or, orphaned, like that's the cornerstone of who I really think is part of my personality. Is just, it's not because my wife and I are some white knights. It's because I was on the other end of not feeling like, not knowing and not fully understanding Christ's love until it was revealed to me, until it was showed to me. And we feel so compelled that that's our job and that's our responsibility, that it's just who we are. And so, I'm the adopted kid who is now adopted 2 kids. My wife and I are foster parents.
We were talking about DNA, how it can be changed by trauma. Mm-hmm. I was changed to my DNA, and the Lord God Almighty.
Yep.
Got a hold of me. And I've always been pursuing me, but when finally my heart turned, but I was just thinking, even with your experiences and being now with your wife, that your spiritual DNA, everything was just changed.
Yeah, and I mean,
it could have gone, but it didn't.
It didn't, and I love how. I love the imagery in Scripture of you're a new creation.
Yes.
The old is gone, the new has come, right? Like, and so the idea is like, I do believe that's a choice though. Like, I do believe that's a choice. I believe I had to make the choice that I was going to embrace who God had designed me to be versus what my pain, my hurt, and what had happened to me said I was, like the example of, I love the example, like they'll take a $20 bill and they'll say, how much is this worth? And you go like, well, $5 because of inflation. Like, no, like a $20 bill, like, and then it's like, no, it's $20. And then you like crumple it up, and like, I actually just preached about this morning. Like, you crumple it up and then you throw it on the ground and you go like, okay, how much is it worth now? Well, it's $20, right? Like, the value is not based on what has happened to it. It's based on who created it, which is U.S. Mint, right? But if we look at that same metric for us, well, who created us and who determines our value? We like to assign our value, and we like to play the comparison game, like, and which makes you feel exactly,
and say, okay, this is what.
Yep.
Because I think it, therefore I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which there's a deep, deep truth to taking the Lord's name in vain. And what it means to take the Lord's name in vain, what it really gets at is the idea that putting God where God wasn't, where God wasn't, was vanity. It was the vain pursuit of the Lord. And so when you start talking about, when you say like I always harp on, because I'm a youth pastor, so my bread and butter is 6th through 12th grade, and I deal with guys and girls alike. And because of how value corrupt our society really is and what it places in kids' heads about where their value is, I hear things, well, I'm worthless, or I'm ugly, or I'm like, all these qualifiers, those aren't your value. Those are just things like, and you're taking the place of the Creator, and you're saying, this is who I am. And it's like God the whole time is just looking at you going, no, you're beautiful, you're loved, you're incredible. I made you in my image. This is how I feel about you. And I think that is really at the heart of, for me, that's really at the heart of why we are supposed to do what we do. It's because we're supposed to change the way people see themselves in light of who God is, and not based on their circumstances or their issues or so on and so forth. If that makes sense.
It makes a
whole
lot. So how do you do that to your 6 to 12?
Yeah.
Years?
I mean, I one, repetition. There's something so simple about repeatedly telling somebody their value, and it just sometimes it just takes a long time.
So,
right?
In other words, that's what your parents did.
Yep, over and over again. To me, how much they love me, how much they care about me, and goodness, patience through so many. Like, I was not an easy child at all. Not an easy child from start to finish. I'm still not an easy child.
Precocious, right?
Yeah. So, like, and my mom, I remember, I was, like I said, ornery. Like, I was an ornery kid, and my mom just loved me and set up structure and boundaries for me and helped me figure out how to do life. And, my dad was just so patient and wise and calm with me, and like so loving. And like, they just over and over and over again just reaffirmed the identity of God in my life. And I think that's the way you're supposed to do it. There's not some secret formula. Like, there isn't some, if I say this combination of words, it's just going to fix a kid. It's going to be messy, because people are messy.
So messy.
It's messy.
Thank you for saying
yes. And it's going to be, and I, when it comes to our story, like, we're in the toddler phase of 2 beautiful children who are adopted and 1 biological son.
And they're beautiful.
And I mean, I know I'm their dad, so I say that. These are little turds. They better be in bed. They better be in bed right now.
Beautiful. So no, they're watching football.
They're probably watching the football game with mommy. But one of the things is, like, they are I think the perfect example of why repetition is things are messy, and repetition is so important, and being consistent with how much you love them and shed love on them, and making mistakes and owning up to them. Like, my mom and dad said sorry. I do love that. And my mom said sorry, still says sorry. My dad still says sorry. Like, because what it did was it showed me their humanity, and that even though they weren't perfect, they were in process. They were trying, and it gave me a benchmark. And like, I mean, with my kids, I'm not perfect. I lose my cool. Like, I get frustrated. Like, I have 2 little boys who are spazzes. Absolutely crazy. They are so high energy.
But they're precious as all get out.
Trust me, I know. But I've lost my cool with that, right? Like, I've lost my cool. Like, why are you guys doing this? Knock it off, And, and like, but I, if I lose my cool, I'll go like, hey guys, Daddy wants you to know I'm sorry. I love you. Like, I shouldn't have lost my cool. You guys weren't doing anything wrong. Like, I think we've corrupted the idea of manliness to be pride based, and a man is humble before anything. A true man. Like a true man is humble before anything else. And the most manly men I know in my life, the ones who are the most incredible, the most the most worthy of leadership are the ones who are the most humble, who go, I'm sorry, I messed this up. And because here's the deal. Nothing is more courageous than admitting you're wrong. It's just not. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, like I would run headfirst into battle, knowing my life was about to end, before I would willfully admit that I was wrong, because that's easier. It's easier to go into battle knowing I'm going to die, because I'll take that with me to my grave, right? Like I'll take that with me, like than admitting I'm wrong. And I think that it's practice. Wow. I think it's witness to somebody doing it and going, oh, that took real strength. And I remember a couple different times where in just really, really good guys that I know admitted wrongdoing and fault. And what the voice in the back of our head says is everybody's going to walk away from you. Nobody's going to stick this out with you. If you tell everybody, they're going to think this about you. And the reality is the humble men who admit they're wrong gain more respect, a better following, and more rapport with people around them than men who are prideful, and not only that, the words they leave by not saying, I'm sorry, I ask your forgiveness. Yeah. It's huge. Yeah. It's huge. And I mean, I don't think men know that. No. And I haven't mastered that at all. I mean, I would love to say like, oh, I'm so humble. And I think, no, I'm still an arrogant jerk sometimes. And like, there'll be times where my wife, I'll say something or do something and my wife will go, like, where'd that come from? That's out of care. And I'll just dig my heels in. And then, I'll have all that conviction in my heart, like, oh, come on, I messed that up. And I'll go and I'll apologize to my wife. And like, I think it's because we believe we're losing something. We believe it's costing us something, or we're losing something by giving ground or admitting that we've wronged or we're wronging somebody. And I think too, there's just a little bit of it. And I can't speak for all men, but I speak for myself. Like there's a little bit of it that I don't want to admit that my actions hurt someone else. Right. And because I don't want to feel that. That's a terrible feeling. I don't want to feel it. And so but what's odd, I mean, like I said, by you not owning up to it, you've hurt the ripple effects. Exactly. Are very dead. Exactly. It's not just your wife. Yeah. It's the kids who watched you. Exactly. And it's my children watching their dad not have humility. Yes. And ultimately because they love me and look up to me, thinking that that's okay. Yes. Right. And I'm affirming in them that that's okay to just be stubborn and not give. And it's like, hey, there's a difference between being convicted and being stubborn. Your conviction comes from a place of wisdom, and it comes from like knowing what is a line you won't cross. Stubbornness just says, I just want to be right, and so, when I do think for me, I watched my dad be humble, and I was a prideful. I mean, I was good at sports. I was good in school. I knew I was a cut above, and I mean, in my head, I thought I was a cut above, and that made me treat people like that. That made me treat people poorly. And that's like, back to, just having that conversation with my buddy in high school where he went like, people don't like you. Like, and just realizing it was because I was a prideful jerk and like, I didn't want to listen, but it was because I thought that what people wanted out of me was this version of Cody, and I wanted to give it to him because I didn't want to be rejected and I wanted them to like me. And I want, I think that's. Have you shared that story with your 6 to 12-year-old graders? Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I am pretty open. I think my wife and I both, Bethany and I both we really think that it's important for us to be an open book because I just watched, the older generation above me be so closed off to any kind of vulnerability and this perception that they always have to have it together. Well, here's the problem. When you model that you have everything together and nothing goes wrong, the people who are learning from you don't know what to do when crisis strikes because they've never watched it. Right? Like I didn't know how to navigate or operate in a space where things weren't going well or where I'd failed somebody because I never watched how somebody handled it right because they just didn't handle it or they acted like they were perfect, right? Like, oh, I didn't, or they deny, right? There's all these things that, they're wrapped up with that.
They were afraid of confrontation?
Yeah, I think I do think it's all fear-based. Yeah. It's like, what do you fear? Yeah. Do you fear the Lord or do you fear man? And it really comes down to like, and when you talk about, when you really want to turn your mind into mush, think about in the mind of an adopted kid, their biggest desire is to feel love. And that is because they don't understand that love is a choice. It's not a feeling or emotion. And so they're trying to manipulate your feelings and emotions because they don't understand the choice. Right. And so, when I was growing up, that was everything about what I did was about trying to, how can I make people love me? Like that, well, obviously my biological mother didn't love me because she gave me up. That was the thought that's in an adopted kid's head. I wasn't good enough. Right. And it's like, and when you take your value out of the hands of people and place it with God, then it frees you up to be who you're supposed to be, not who other people want you to be. And so I needed that. I needed that, swift kick in the pants to realize like, I'm fighting for man's affection, a person's affection, and I've already got God's. So why am I? Yeah. So
tell me a little bit about your choice, your family's choice to have adoption.
Yeah. So Bethany and I,
did you do foster to adopt?
We did foster to adopt, and we have a crazy story. So. We had been struggling. We had been struggling with infertility for about 4 or 5 years, just shy of 5 years. And you'll love this. You'll really love this. Okay, so Bethany and I, we go and we check out an adoptive service, and they they sit down. There's a panel of three different adoption options. Right? There's international.
Right.
There's domestic, right. And then there's foster to adopt.
Right.
International got on. We're like, oh, it's incredible. We got off the plane. We saw our son for the first time. We knew in our hearts this was our son forever. It's beautiful. Yeah, which is amazing.
Because of age.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I couldn't foster a cat. I wasn't foster a child.
No, exactly. Yeah. For
2 weeks straight.
Oh, you'll love this. You'll love this. So their story is beautiful. We're like, oh my gosh, we're going to do international adoption. This is amazing. Then the domestic adoption. Oh, it was amazing. Went to the hospital. We saw him for the first time. We held him. He's our baby. Oh, they were like, huh. And then it got to the foster to adopt. And we're like, where's the sob story? And the guy was like, don't do this. It's terrible. and I remember my Bethany and I had driven an hour and a half to get to this seminar. And we're driving home. And we're just in utter disbelief. And we're just emotionally drained. And we're just driving, and she turns to me. She goes, so we're on the same page. We're not doing foster care, right? And I'm like, yep, not doing that. So a couple months goes by. September of 2018. And my wife, my incredible, beautiful wife, she is September, and she walks into my office at our house. She knocks on the door, and she goes, hey, so we're doing foster care, aren't we? And I'm like, yep. Darn it. Because we'd both been praying, and we both were like, both felt like God was telling us to do that. So September happens. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May 15th, 2019, Blaze Richard's born. And we go and pick him up from the hospital.
And what do you do?
And we adopt him. Like,
were you sobbing?
We were, yeah. Everything they're so good, and they really do an incredible job. We went through Wellspring Lutheran Services. Big shout out. They are so incredible. Like, if you're looking into adoption, you're looking into foster care, you're looking into that, please find an organization that cares about you.
Absolutely.
Like, that is not just a number cruncher that's just not trying to get kids and get their quota up. Like, that cares about you as a family, because they care about the kid. If they care about you, they will care about the kid, right? And so we were so fortunate. And they called us, and they had trained us, like, when you hold them for the first time, just know that the goal is reunification. Like, the goal is to reunify them with mom or dad, or mom and dad, or family. So they're probably only with you for a little bit, right? And so don't let your heart, love them, but just make sure that you guard your heart and you'll let it go. And I held Blaze for the first time, and I forgot every single thing they said. I was like, "This is my son. Yeah. Nobody can tell me different. This is my son." I'm like sitting there crying, holding him, like, "This is my baby boy." And true to form, I mean, God, like, I do believe God put that feeling in my heart. I do believe that God put that assurance in me, like, this is because we had waited for so long. We bring Blaze home. 2 weeks later, Bethany's like, "I'm not feeling so good."
Oh, no.
And 9 months later, good old Striker boy. Actually, 7 months later, Striker boy comes along. So our biological son. And so
you basically had twins.
Yeah, we had the Irish twins. Yeah. Basically, Irish twins. Yeah. And and of course, everybody afterwards was like, "That happens all the time. Yeah, we could have told you it was going to happen." I'm like, nobody told me. Yeah. Not a single darn one of you told me that we were going to adopt a kid and then we were going to have a kid right afterwards. Nobody told us that. So it was funny because a month. It's just cool how all the numbers. I'm a weird numbers guy, but like all the numbers match up. So December 20th, 2019 is when we adopted Blaze. Okay. Literally a month later, January 20th is when we had Striker. So like that process, like, he's our official son, slam the gavel. He's got our last name. And then a month later we have Striker. Yeah. And then like a year and a half later, Fina comes along. The little princess.
She is a princess.
Yeah. So, and we are very rare in the foster care world. Not often do you have parents who foster 2 kids and adopt the same 2 kids. Normally, that's not how it works, but for some reason, that's just how it worked for us. And our foster care agency was like, "So you guys want to like keep your license?" I'm like, "I want to tempt fate. How about we just we're 2 for 2. Let's like wrap it up." But I mean, we're still foster care advocates because we think it's such an incredible thing. Yeah. And it wasn't. I mean, Blaze's was pretty straightforward, but Fina's was pretty turbulent. We thought we were going to get the call. December 23rd comes along, and at our church we do Christmas Adam and Christmas Eve. So if I don't know if you get this, but like Christmas Adam is the day before Christmas Eve. Yeah. So I can just explain for the viewers. Yeah. The listeners at home. But so we do a Christmas Adam service on the 23rd, and then Christmas Eve on the 24th. And so I have this huge performance that we have to do, and it's the last day that DHHS was open, and Bethany are like waiting by the phone. We're like, "We're going to get a call." We'd fill out all of our adoption paperwork. We'd like, "This is going to happen. We're going to get this call, and we're gonna have Fina, and she's going to be official." And it's like.
And you're thinking, because they're not going to work.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to get it. So end of the day comes, and we get a phone call, and they're like, "We're really sorry to tell you, but there's been a massive complication. Biological dad's back in the picture. Once rights, we're trying to track everything down. He'll probably likely get terminated, but this." And they're like, and we're like, we're devastated. I just remember Bethany laying on the ground in the fetal position, just crying and crying. And I remember.
And this is on Christmas Eve.
This is 2 days before Christmas, December 23rd. And I have this big production I got to go run as a pastor. And I just remember, I was so numb. I was just so numb. I was like, God, like I don't think I was ever at a place where I was mad at God, because I don't, I think it's crazy for me to be mad at God when He's done so much for us. Like. Because I don't think it was God. I think it's people. I think it's just circumstance. And I remember I didn't want to hold her.
Are you putting yourself to sleep?
No. Like, I didn't want to hold her. Like, I didn't want Christmas season. Okay. I didn't even want to hold her. I didn't want to look at her. I was just like, and I was just so distant.
I know
Yeah.
why you were yawning. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
He was about.
Yeah.
He was feeling sentimental.
Yeah. No. So I mean, and I just remember like, and I don't have. That's if you talk about regrets, I wish I would have just given her my whole heart, regardless, because I felt like in that time, and you can't do anything about it. It's like I was just numb, and I was experiencing that, and it's like.
So wait, explain that. So you were like, I'm just gonna give her my all because I love her that much.
Oh, I was the opposite. I was the opposite. I wish I would have been like that. I wish I would have been like, but I was so selfishly hurt, and so devastated. I'm like, she's not gonna be our daughter. And she's gonna be gone, and I can't. I remember the thought that went through my head. Was, if I give all of my heart to her, and she's gone, I won't be able to put the pieces back together. Like I'll never heal. Like because it's akin to losing a child. Yeah. It's akin to losing a child, and I'm like, she's been in our house for half a year. Like we love her. This is our daughter. Like. And I just go like, this is not fair, but and through that process, I remember Bethany just holding her so tight, and Bethany made up for all the selfish protection I had, giving myself. But we got out of Christmas, and I remember just thinking like, do you want her to, if this is the end, do you not want to do everything in your power to make sure that she knows that she is loved at the highest possible level? I just remember holding her. And, no, this is what I'm like. This is how I'm like processing internally, and my wife's just numb, just going through the motions and like.
But it also sounds like you were going back to your childhood.
Oh, I was another rejection.
Not gonna get close.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get close because she's just gonna leave, and then I'm gonna be stuck, devastated, and hurt, and broken, and. And I just, through that, it was just like, do you really want her to not know love? Like, even if she's, like, you love her. You do love her. You're just hurt right now. And, being at a place where we're like, no matter what happens, we're going to love this little girl like she's ours. And we're going to try and love her so intensely. Because, you just, people are like, well, they're too young. They don't understand. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I agree with that. I think genuine divine love that comes from the Lord is something that you can experience whether you understand it or not. And
and you understood it too.
Yeah, I did.
Like it would have changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and the other thing, my wife, one thing Bethany did say is, do you want to lose her and have the regret of that you didn't do everything to love her as much as you could? And I was like, yeah. But I mean, that's real. That's what foster parents go through. We talk to other parents who have lost kids to the system or to their, biological mom and dad who they thought they were going to adopt, and they thought it was hook, line, and sinker, and they get the same call, and they're like, they're devastated, but they're like, somehow God supernaturally heals your heart and helps you move on. And it's not like everything's hunky dory and you're somehow in a different place. You're forever changed, and you will forever be changed, but you have to trust that the person that you're changed into is who God's designed you to be for a certain reason. So
you can show them your love and keep showing them, mm-hmm. and they can keep rejecting it. Mm-hmm. But the deal is that it doesn't change anything. Mm-hmm. You have to keep, mm-hmm. not that you don't put up boundaries and things like that, because, sometimes those kids don't. They choose not to. Yep. And you saw that in your in Ohio, that Ohio safe house. There were. Did you ever see any of those kids ever understand?
Maybe one or two. One of them that still keeps in touch with me today. This like has messaged me the last couple months, but like for the most part, those kids are lost to the world and to the system, and like, it's hard. I'm gonna say this. It's hard because when you've worked in it, and maybe I'm just not. I do think ultimately I'm not built for that, but I don't think that that's an excuse not to do that work.
And let me tell you why. Mm-hmm. And this is me discovering it. And I've told the story on LLT before. My Sunday school teacher, mm-hmm. Roger Bailey, and we were talking. He was talking about Calvinism and all this other stuff. And I was saying, well, then if it's already elected, why bother? Praying and all this other stuff. Yeah. And he made something very, very clear. He says the reason you never stop praying, you never stop hoping, you never stop loving, is because you're in the middle of a stinking story here, darling. You don't know where the end is going, and you don't know how God is going to intercede.
Like my coach used to say, don't ever give up on the play.
What?
Right. My coach used to say, don't ever give up on the play until the whistle blows, right? Well, the whistle hasn't blown.
Yeah, it hasn't blown.
Right? So, don't give up on the play.
Don't give up on our kids.
Yep. And I think that's
maybe,
so important.
Maybe in a way, we don't give up on the fathers either. Maybe somehow.
Yeah. Yep.
Fathers are going to step up. Maybe there's going to be a great revival
I hope so. I hope so.
In this country.
Yep, I hope so. And I mean, when I worked at Safe House, that was one of the things that was so obvious. I mean, it was so obvious to me. I say so obvious. It's not obvious to everybody. I say so obvious because to me, it's impossible not to see this. I talked about my brain. It's impossible not to see a scatter plot. Okay, you're doing this. Well, if you had a dad, he wouldn't have let you get away with this, right? He would have told you this is not how you live, and I love you anyways, but this is not how you live. If you would have had a dad, he would have gone, hey, I love you, you have value, this is incredible. There's just something about it. I do believe, and I'm not saying that there's not hope for kids that don't have fathers. That's not what I'm saying, because there's such redeeming love and goodness and the loving embrace of Jesus' love. I mean, that's just the truth. So it's not like all hope is lost if you don't have a dad or you don't have a mom, but it just means we and I think this as a part of Christian faith and being part of what I consider the body of Christ, which is the church, and everybody who says, I love Jesus and this is who I'm serving. I think that we have to be the ones that go, listen, I don't really care what the noise is. I don't care what the world says. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to love and I'm going to unconditionally love. And I'm going to adopt kids that aren't my kids. And I'm going to adoption, in the formal process, is not the only form of adoption. We're called to adopt. We are very clearly called to adopt in Scripture. And that means if your teenager has kids that are friends that don't have a good role model, you need to step up and be a good parent in their life. Be that parent. Don't be scared of that. And
the mentorship.
Exactly.
I was at this conference, and this man, I sat beside this man the last day, and we were listening. It was a Jordan Leonard thing. It was excellent. And he was just talking to me about how he had wanted to foster. After he had told me his business story. And he said, that's just one thing we never got around to, we never did. And there was full of regret. And I said, but you don't get this. Because he had told me how he had mentored employee after employee after employee of young men. Yeah. I said, it just may not look what you're thinking but you have.
Yeah, 100%.
He has mentored so many young men. And my brother-in-law was like that. Yeah. I mean, he stepped in and he made sure the younger people, the younger men, loved.
Yeah. I think that when you've been adopted and you feel the love of the adopters, it's impossible not to want to do the same thing for others. And I think when it comes down to it, that's why I think I love the parallel of Jesus so much. Because when you experience how Jesus loves you, regardless of what has happened to you, you just want to make sure other people can feel that. And that's, I think, the heart. I think for me, I have had such an incredible experience being an adopted kid. I wouldn't say it was this terrible, horrible, miserable thing. Granted, I don't have what would look on paper as tragic a story or experience as some other kids who have been adopted in the foster care system. So I'm not here to tell you it was some terrible experience for me. I can't say that. I can just say that I have been so blessed and fortunate, and I don't know why, that I was in a position and in a place where my experience was that my parents were so incredible to me and they love me so much. And knowing that, I just want to do whatever I can to make sure that other people can experience that. We have a 23-year-old that lives with us.
This is what I love.
Yeah.
I was going to get around to that.
So like we have a 23-year-old that lives with us. He's a worship pastor. He's single. His name's Mark Mellinger. He's on Facebook and on Instagram. And if you're single,
he's a pretty
lovely
awesome
ladies,
guy.
he's a pretty awesome guy. So just saying, shout out to Mark. But we adore Mark. He's part of our family. We call him our oldest son. He has a loving mother that is a great mother to him. So it's not like he has this story where he's But one of the things is he has a really bad relationship with his dad. And his dad was abusive and really bad to him. And there's moments where when we have interactions, I've told him this, I'm only 11 years your senior, so I couldn't be your dad, but I would be proud to have you as a son. And and where there's moments where I think he realizes, I think he has the connection and he realizes that love exists. And even though he didn't get from his biological father, that we love him and that he's like a son to us. And I just think that transforms people. I know as we sit here and we record this, I know that Mark would run through a wall for me. I just know that. It's not because that's how we've designed her or we're trying to get something out of him, because we don't feel that way. What we feel like is we know what love looks like. We want Mark to experience love. And I've told him this, and he agrees, that one day he's going to give his basement up to some teenager or 20-something-year-old, and he and his wife, his future wife, hopefully one of you listeners, is going to,
Send resumes to Cody.
Yeah. So that's the hope, is that, this is another aside. Kyle Young, who's our good friend, invited me into his home for 3 years. He would tell you it was 12 and a half, but that's not accurate. But for 3 or 4 years, and he and his wife Patty treated me with such incredible dignity and respect, and held me to a higher standard, taught me how to be a better man, taught me how to be a good husband to my wife and a good father, and I got to watch them do life together. And it changed my whole perspective. And it was it's
the trajectory.
It is.
If we thought more of that as Christians, we would open. I mean, and it may not be that you invite them into your home. It may be you take them out to lunch every now and then. It may, whatever small thing, you have no idea what it's going to do. Yeah,
those little things where God's nudging you and you're faithful to it. I just did the holy nudge, are you listening to the holy nudge? Are you doing what God's asking you to do in the small moments? Because he's not going to give you the big moments if you're not doing what he's asking you in the small moments. We know that.
That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. So do the little things, right?
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
What about the adoptees, the foster kids? We've already talked about, the people in Ohio. But let's say you have, as a parent, tried to love, and you keep loving your adopted foster child, and they, are still pushing. The thing is, as a parent, you're not going to stop loving, but there is a time where you have to put down boundaries. You have to, because that is love as well.
I think you will never. I just think about Jesus. Yeah. You will never regret giving away genuine, pure love. Yeah. You just won't. Doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. Doesn't mean it's not going to suck. Doesn't mean you're not going to get eviscerated. But you're never going to regret it.
Oh, yeah.
You'll regret the love you withheld.
Yes,
right.
That is the moral of the story, right?
Yeah. So, and that's ultimately how I felt about Fina. It's I was going to regret the love I withheld. Yeah. And so for those parents, those parents, the Bible tells us to consider it pure joy when we're facing trials and tribulations of the faith. And what bigger tribulation of our faith than loving somebody who won't receive it? That's the story of Jesus, right? And so,
how often do we operate on a scarcity?
Yes, absolutely.
If I give that much, there'll be nothing left to me, and the Lord is not like that.
I just love. We had this incredible woman, Karen Strawn, who had fostered and adopted. She'd fostered 47 kids and adopted 30 of them. She's amazing. We did training with her. She's amazing. And she, I'm going to botch this and I feel so bad, but I just remember her I just remember her telling, like, just saying, like, you can't, what, she said something so good, and now I'm going to lose it. And Bethany and I used to say it all the time, but she's basically, in essence, she was saying, like, you're never going to regret, like, giving your full heart to a kid, even though it hurts. You're going to regret that you didn't. Yes. And you're going to be at a place where, like, you have enough to give. They might not have enough to receive. Right? Like, and so, like, just know that when you're giving, you're not giving with the expectation of a return. So when you love a kid unconditionally for real, you're loving them knowing that you don't own them, knowing that they may go away, knowing they may go back in the system, knowing that they may never return that love to you, but that you're being faithful to loving them no matter what. So she was great. I mean, I just remember
that was great.
She was really, Bethany. I was just like, she's like, do you think we're gonna adopt that many kids? I was like, no, like, no. I'm a pastor. I'm a She was like she like patented some medical thing, and they had like 700 acres, and like she had a 36-room house. Like, yeah, if I had 36 rooms in my house, we'd adopt 36 kids, well, right? Like, but like Bethany, I joke about that. Like, yeah, sure. All three of our kids are in one room. Like,
yeah, but there's no pain.
Nope.
They
no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. They move as a unit.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just don't touch the princess.
Exactly.
Don't touch the princess. Princess.
Don't mess with. Don't ever hit mommy. Don't ever hit your little sister. You guys can wallop each other, and you can wallop daddy.
You can be a Detroit Lion.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, they're Cleveland Browns. The kids are Cleveland Browns.
Goodness.
I mean, they're Lions for now. They're Lions for now because like we lost and we have to root for somebody in the playoffs. But
wow.
So yeah.
Well, I do appreciate you being on Moral Tea.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's Cody Patrick Morehead. Like him on Facebook is Cody Patrick. There's a long story behind that. And now, why don't you share our wonderful...
our sponsor for the day, Salvation Coffee, located in Birmingham, North Carolina. Salvation Coffee is veteran-owned and operated. It makes delicious hand-brewed beverages and incredible merch. Stop by Salvation Coffee.
But it's Burlington, North Carolina.
It is.
And more than that, I love these little bottles. But
they bottle their own. We did. They have, can I say this on the podcast? Yes. They're doing OJ themed. And so their drinks were the Verdict, the White Bronco, the Glove, and we had the Acquittal today. So
that one was
because it's January.
Yes.
So they're kind of capitalizing on the you
love their branding because
their branding's really funny. They follow. I mean, I don't just on the more professional note. Like they follow Purple Mattresses. Do you know Purple Mattresses? So they follow that comedy based advertisement where they kind of sell what they're doing by their quirkiness and their individuality. And I really love that they embrace that. And great brand of coffee. I believe they ship worldwide. They're on Instagram as Salvation Coffee Company. They're really, really great.
Well, and I had to be noted.
Yeah.
Today was my day. I had my first.
You'd never had cold coffee before.
Because I'm old.
Renee, I'm surprised by that. Actually, I'm really surprised by that.
There's only one way to have coffee, and it is always hot.
That's...
So I did branch out. I had the salty dog.
Oh, it was good. Yeah, the salty dog.
Really, really, really.
It was a white chocolate salty dog with macadamia nut milk.
It was lovely.
Very, very good. So, yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you. I know Anna Grace Smith, who's not here, and she will be.
Yes. I'm not nearly as pretty as her, but happy to be here.
Yes, she's wonderful, but we are really glad you're here, and thanks so much for showing up for Moral Tea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate this.
Appreciate it.